All right, so good evening. Christina Schlitt and I would like to thank everybody for spending some time with us this evening. And we want to welcome Dr. Elise Foligno-Lay and Dr. Frank Straub, co-directors of the Prevent to Protect program centered at MSU this evening. As our members know, the League of Women Voters is a nonprofit political organization that works to protect voters' rights and encourages informed and active participation in government. And throughout its 100-year existence, it has remained nonpartisan. The League influences public policy through education and advocacy, and one of our advocacy groups is the Firearm Safety Network. Now, before we get into our program tonight, Christina is going to say a few words about the significance of today in the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Vicki. Michigan, we have good news today, as well as some sad to reflect on. Michigan has new gun safety laws starting today. The first one being safe storage. Firearms in homes with children must be securely stored with a gun lock or in a safe. The second one is extreme risk protection orders. Extreme risk protection orders, sometimes called red flag or abbreviated ERPO, are a tool to temporarily disarm someone who has become a danger to themselves or others. Family members, law enforcement, or medical professional can file a petition with the court to grant an extreme risk order. A judge will then determine if the order is warranted. The third one is protections for domestic violence survivors. Those who are convicted of felony or misdemeanor domestic violence charges are now prohibited from possessing firearms or ammunition for 8 years after the completion of their sentence. And then the fourth one is all firearm sales in Michigan require a background check, including those conducted by licensed firearm dealers or between individuals. And I will put the reference to those in the chat where you can get more detailed information. But the next thing that I would like to highlight is the 1-year anniversary of the deadly shooting at Michigan State University's campus. The university and community partners are inviting those who have been impacted or want to show support for the university community to light luminaries in their remembrance. It's hard to believe it was only a year ago today. And we also honor those that were impacted by the Oxford high school shootings. I have a link in the chat to that. So Vicki, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Christina. I think an important way to honor those 3 students that were lost a year ago and all those who are victims of gun violence is the research that groups like Prevent to Protect are doing to understand the why and address the how of these horrific events. The Prevent to Protect program is a unique partnership that brings together MSU's Department of Psychiatry with the Safe and Sound Schools program in a mission to prevent middle and high school students from engaging in targeted school attacks. Now, for those who don't know, Safe and Sound Schools is a national nonprofit school safety advocacy and resource center that was founded by parents who lost children at Sandy Hook School in 2012. Now, before I turn the mic over, we'd like to say a few words about our speakers. Elise Foligno-Lay is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, and presently she serves as the associate chairperson of education and research in the Department of Psychiatry at MSU. Her long list of accomplishments has resulted in the appointment of a 4-year term, which began in September of 2022, as a commissioner on Governor Whitmer's Mental Health and School Safety Commission. And she also serves on the Oakland County Prosecutors Commission to address gun violence and is a member of the Michigan Board of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Now, before taking his present positions in the psychiatry department at MSU, Frank Straub, who has a doctorate degree in criminal justice, served 30+ years in federal, state, and local law enforcement. Dr. Straub currently serves on the International Association of Chiefs of Police Mass Violence Advisory Initiative, the Oakland County Gun Violence Commission, and the Summit Point Community Mental Health Authority Board of Directors in Calhoun County. He has participated in numerous congressional and White House briefings and is frequently invited as a commentator and analyst for national and international media outlets. So we'd like to thank you both for sharing the work that you do with us this evening. And we will have time for Q&A session after the presentation, which Christina will field and moderate. So please enter any questions you might have in the chat box. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Lay and Dr. Straub.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Lyle, pull up the PowerPoint and we'll get going. I do want to apologize to everybody. I do have to leave at 7:30 because I actually have to get my daughter from soccer practice. So we can't leave her stranded at the indoor soccer field. So I apologize, but Dr. Lyle, I'll take over from there. So a little bit about how we got to Prevent to Protect. I had the privilege of serving at the National Policing Institute after I retired from law enforcement. And while I was there, I started a center for targeted violence prevention. And we received a grant, several grants actually, from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Community Policing. And the purpose of that grant was to start a database that tracked both averted and completed school shootings. It's actually the only database in the country that tracks averted school shootings. And we've been very fortunate with the move to Prevent to Protect that I was able to bring the averted school violence database to this project, and it provides a research base for many of the things that you'll hear about this evening. So I think with that, we can go to the next slide. So in 2021, we did an analysis of approximately 200 planned school attacks. These were planned but stopped, averted. And some of the data that I think is relevant to tonight's conversation, but also, as I said, informed the development of Prevent to Protect in part. I just want to share those with you, that 61%, almost 62% of the averted attacks in K through 12 schools were planned by persons younger than 18 years of age. The average age was 15. Interestingly, the majority of the planned attacks were directed at high school or middle schools that were located in rural or suburban communities. The weapons that were most frequently used were firearms. And I think this is a very powerful and a very hopeful statistic. 90% of the prevented school attacks were discovered and reported by peers and parents. And I say that's positive because it gives us hope that if we work together as communities, we do have, I think, the opportunity to prevent the vast majority of school attacks. We also found that multidisciplinary behavioral threat assessment teams are incredibly important to identify individuals in need of assistance, of intervention, of services, and then providing management to those individuals and their caregivers. As part of that, we found that intensive case management and mentoring were very important to both assistance and also resilience against further involvement in violence. Go ahead, Elise. So we also looked at some of the after-action reports that were done after some of the larger events, and a couple stand out. And I just want to share a few things from the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting report that was done by the Child Advocate's Office in Connecticut. They're highlighted in blue. And one of the things that the Child Advocate's Office recommended is that there has to be ready access to experts in children's mental health and development. And we have to realize that the duration of services that we provide these high-risk, high-need adolescents must be sustained over time. It's not 2 or 3 or 24 sessions of therapy and medication, but it really takes a community commitment to these individuals and their families to stay with them until we're able to change the individual's life trajectory to pro-social involvement and engagement. And it's also imperative that we're able to share information between disciplines, and that we break down the silos that sometimes exist between law enforcement, elementary schools, school districts, and mental health providers. When you look at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School report, they talk about threat assessment and the importance of having behavioral threat assessment teams in schools and school districts. But one of the things that they noted is that threat assessment teams are problem identifiers. They're not problem solvers, and they're not managers of high risk, high need adolescents. And so those reports, those statistics speak very much to the creation of Prevent to Protect. So how do we manage high risk adolescents in the community context? We believe that these incidents, the prevention of these incidents, more importantly, demand a whole of community approach that is research informed, evidence-based, public health oriented, and multidisciplinary. So adolescent targeted violence prevention has the potential to be most successful when it is multidisciplinary and assesses holistically the multitude of needs and protective factors that are available to bring to these individuals and their caregivers. So with that, Elise, I'll turn it over to you.
So what we know, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and oftentimes what I would see in practice is that a child or adolescent made a threat. Maybe a behavioral threat assessment was done, maybe not. But then no one exactly knew what to do with this child. School had a piece of information, maybe mental health, we had another piece, and maybe law enforcement had a piece. But all those pieces weren't exactly, we didn't have anyone who was able to put all the pieces together. We also know that, like Dr. Straub said, one positive adult in a kid's life could change the trajectory of that kid's life. And so that's how we started to formulate really our model. We know that evidence shows that mentorship can mediate a vulnerability toward violence in even the most high-risk teens. So if we're looking at these adolescents who are planning an act of targeted violence against the school or an act of mass violence in their school, then we know that if they are shown something different, right? If they can put meaning to their lives in a different way, if they have a positive role model or someone who cares about them, that may be the thing that changes the thought about needing to act in a violent way. So, so we want to really, part of our model is really that mentorship piece. And it really is a protective factor against childhood trauma. So our interventions, we believe, should be aimed at helping change the trajectory of one individual's life in order to protect all of our children. We also believe that intervention needs to happen early because of brain development. The earlier we intervene, the better the outcomes long-term. So in October of 2022, we received a $15 million grant funded by the Michigan Department of Education. It was in the budget in section 97F, and it was called the Cross Systems Intervention Grant. And it was for this pilot project, this model that I'll describe further in a few minutes, that these individuals who are identified within their school system or their community mental health or within their region and have had a behavioral threat assessment, what we do is we come in and we provide a further holistic multidisciplinary assessment. Either we do psychiatric and psychological assessment on these individuals who've already been identified as high risk and high need. And then we create a plan for these individuals, and we assign these individuals to a case manager and a mentor within their community. The case manager's job is a systems navigation job, and the mentor job is that one positive adult in the individual's life. The other part of this allocation is we were tasked with placing 5 regional teams throughout the state of Michigan. On those teams, we'll talk a little bit more about, but they include a case manager and a mentor. The other part of this is we need an evaluation by a third party of this pilot project. The whole goal is to develop a project that, or a program that really could be implemented in any community and help any community. And so that's what we're aiming at. We'll talk a little bit about our third-party evaluator, who is Harvard University. And also to eventually create best practices, trainings, and education series for all community entities. So, like Vicki pointed out, Prevent to Protect brings together Michigan State University's Department of Psychiatry and Safe and Sound Schools with a mission to prevent middle and high school students from engaging in targeted school attacks. So Prevent to Protect has 4 pillars. Those include the intensive support teams, which is the main part or the main crux of that pilot project. And then we also provide community consultation. We'll talk a little bit more about that, education trainings, an education series, and research, building upon our averted school violence database. Right now, this is our team. We have a hub team with Frank and I, Frank with his expertise in psychology and criminology, me with my expertise in child and adolescent psychiatry, a lead case manager who's ex-law enforcement, as well as a master's level social worker, a project manager who is obtaining her PhD in education, and Steve McMahon, our law enforcement and security outreach coordinator, who was with the Secret Service throughout his career. And then we have 2 intensive support teams made up of a case manager and a mentor in each, both Calhoun County and West Shore ISD. So what is the hub made up of? You saw the pictures a little bit. We have psychiatry, psychology, social work, educators, and criminology and law enforcement. We believe that we really need this multidisciplinary team so that all aspects of this individual and their family can be examined and can be assessed. And by doing so, we can put together a really good holistic treatment plan for the individuals who are referred to us. So this is just a depiction of the model. So we have a hub. The hub is located at Michigan State University in the Department of Psychiatry. And then we have intensive support teams, and those are placed within the community, but overseen and guided and supported by our hub team at Michigan State. And when I say guided and supported, this is a daily basis. We meet with the intensive support teams in our communities, and those intensive support teams meet with our participants. The support services, like we said, 5 regional teams. So we support and guide our mentor and case management manager, and we implement services. So we don't directly provide the services, but really we are the systems navigators. So we provide case management, systems navigation, mentorship, and monitoring within the community. And again, as Frank mentioned, this is longitudinal and this is sustained. So how does the program work? So in the state of Michigan, we've been lucky enough that the Michigan State Police have an initiative that they started a year or 2 ago, and that is to put a behavioral threat assessment team in every school district throughout the state of Michigan, and they've been fairly successful with doing this. They've been going about the state training behavioral threat assessment teams and helping schools, districts, and ISDs to put together a structured format for whenever an individual comes up that may be a risk of targeted violence. That individual is referred to the behavioral threat assessment team, who does a risk of violence. After that behavioral threat assessment is done, an individual can be referred to us. They can be referred to us through schools, law enforcement, a mental health entity, a family, a parent, a guardian. Really anyone can refer to us. And then we determine if the individual is eligible. Because of the allocation and what the allocation states, we take middle or high school students. Middle and high school students is not very clearly defined, but so we use neuroscience to back up what we define as adolescence. And we take that from about age 10 to age 24. In the state of Michigan, individuals can have education up until age 26, depending on what their IEP may say. But we, in general, are taking individuals age 10 to 24. They have to be enrolled or recently enrolled in a middle or high school. This project is voluntary. So parents have to agree to volunteer their student for the program. That was questioned early on by a lot of entities. Who's going to volunteer their child for a high-risk program? But what we have found is lots of parents. Parents have not been able to navigate the system really well. It's been very difficult, as we can all attest to in trying to navigate either the mental health system or the medical system or any of our systems. And so what we're finding is parents who have a child who's at high risk are really volunteering for this program, more so than we ever thought could be possible. They're really looking for the help, most parents. The individual has to be at risk of committing an act of targeted violence. So they have to have behaviors of concern, or they have to have made a threat or drawn a picture. So, we look at all of those areas that may be considered a threat of violence within the school community. And then they have to agree to participate in a holistic, multidisciplinary assessment. So prior to doing this, so we determine that they're referred to us, then we determine that they're eligible for the program. And then after that, we do some pre-assessment measures. We know that the path to violence is long and complex. It's not usually impulsive, right? And there are many factors that lead an individual to perpetrate an act of violence, especially a child or adolescent, right? And so we want to look at everything really carefully. So we want to look at psychiatric conditions, but we also want to look at environmental conditions, things that are going on in school, resources that the family have. So prior to the assessment and to bringing them to Michigan State, our intensive support team, that mentor and that case manager, go out and they meet with the family. They help complete a history form of the family and the student. They look at measures such as a child depression inventory, an anxiety inventory, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So we look at those as well. We look at what's called a child behavior checklist, also known as the Achenbach. And that's a measure of how a parent rates their child really against and is normed against other children of the same age. So that gives us a little idea of how a parent sees their child. And we also look at how the child or adolescent sees themselves. So these are just kind of other screening measures that we look at, again, to get this holistic view. Then we have this multidisciplinary holistic assessment. So they come in and they receive a psychiatric assessment. This is all in one day. We bring them to Michigan State. We meet with the parents, we meet with the child, we meet with them together, we meet with them separately. And then they also get to do some cool activities at Michigan State University, such as going to a museum, to the zoo, things like that. And so we do a psychiatric assessment, and that evaluates medical and psychiatric symptoms. It evaluates biopsycho and social factors. We do a risk assessment. We evaluate any comorbid conditions, any other medical conditions, substance use conditions. Developmental assessment is done as well. Where are you with regard to milestones? What kind of extra services and resources might you need? A trauma assessment, and the Savory and the Hare are looking at violent tendencies. So we do those as well. Then we do a targeted violence criminogenic risk factor analysis. And this can happen in parallel, simultaneously, or before we bring them down to Michigan State. And we assess their criminogenic risk factors and threat factors. We look at extremism, we look at radicalization, we look at access to weapons, we look at safety measures that have been put in place for this individual. We look at video, media, those kind of things, really trying to get a holistic picture of that as well. And then we do a needs assessment, and this looks at the social history of the family, analysis of the family structure, school accommodations and supports, financial, transportation, pro-social activity engagement, and safety planning. So we try to really create this holistic picture. So on assessment day, we do the assessment, we do the criminogenic risk factor, we do the needs assessment. And then after we do all this, we release the family and the child to go do an activity, and the whole group meets together. So the hub team, as well as the intensive support team, and we put together what's called an individualized care plan, sort of in vein of an IEP that we hear about at schools. So this care plan includes all of the strengths, all of the issues we're going to work on, all of the needs for resources, and we put together a very comprehensive plan for each participant. That plan is then discussed with the family in the intensive support team. It's taken back to the student's community, the child or adolescent's community, where it's implemented by our intensive support team. So they're not providing the therapy or the psychiatry or the medical care, but they are assuring that that child in their community receive the psychiatric care that they need, the medical care, the dentistry, the engagement in pro-social activities, the transportation if needed to their medical appointments, or so on and so forth. And we have funding to help do that. So this again is the individualized care plan. These are what it focuses on. And then we also have the monitoring of that individual. In our intensive support teams, we want to meet with these individuals on a daily or every other day basis, checking in. Because remember, we're taking the highest risk, highest need kids within our Michigan community. And then the implementation by a regional case manager. And these are the job of each intensive support team member. These are their jobs sort of delineated. So the regional case manager supports the participant and their family, helps them to access resources, helps with systems navigation, helps to address any barriers to getting care that the family may need or any resources that they need, and fosters a sense of community for this individual, for their family, and really helps the entities within the community, such as the school, law enforcement, and mental health, to work together to help this individual and to support this individual so they obtain the resources they need to keep them safe in an effort to keep all of our children safe. The regional mentor monitors the participant, encourages pro-social activity, and fosters this sense of community for this young person. So we believe in our models based on these C's, right? We believe that everybody really has a sense and a need to belong, especially in adolescence, right? And often these individuals who perpetrate an act of violence do not feel a connection to their community. So our goal with these intensive support teams is to provide that connection to a community, to provide companionship, and to help this individual feel like they're competent, they're good at something, that they have meaning in their life that's something other than violence, and that they're contributing to this community in which they belong. Is Frank still there? I can only see a few. Okay, so he had to go. So I apologize. So the next pillar we have, so the main crux of our project is those intensive support teams. That's the clinical piece. That's the main part. But we wanted to be able to offer more to Michigan than just the intensive support teams, because remember, right now that's funded for just 5 regions. So we also have community consultation. This is through our website. So any community entity can get on the website and ask for a consultation regarding violence prevention, management of an individual in school, management after a behavioral threat is done, how to refer to resources. We have a no wrong door policy, and so we try to give considerations and recommendations to any entity who will ask for a consult. The other pillar is education and training. We have created a toolkit for managing high-risk adolescents in a community context. This was made in part by a small grant from Motorola Solutions and our grant from the Michigan Department of Education. And this goes through the warning signs. It goes through points of intervention. It talks about psychiatric care. It talks about medical care as well. It talks about risk assessment. And so this is really a comprehensive guide that we have used to train individuals in lots of in schools, in mental health entities, and in law enforcement. We also have spoken really around the country through the U.S. Secret Service, the National Threat Assessment. We have backing from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We've spoken at the the Mackinac Policy Conference. Through Safe and Sound Schools, they have multiple conferences, summits throughout the country, in every region of the country, and we've been part of that. Through the police, Ingham County Sheriff's, Lansing Police Department, Homeland Security, NAMI, and then the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, and the School Safety Commission through the governor's office, just to name a few. We've also trained medical students and residents throughout our trainings. And then the last pillar is our research. The Averted School Violence Database, which Frank created, is a database when used to have 170. We've built that database up over the last year or so, and now we have over 325 averted cases that can be looked at, that can be studied. And really, they're very informative because we have a lot more averted cases than we have completed cases. And what we really need to look at, and this was really Frank's idea, is look at what it was that helped us to avert these acts. There's so much to learn from what stopped it instead of what took place. We're building a national and international community of practice. We have an advisory board with international and national experts. And we're developing promising practices through the study of our project, the Averted School Violence Database, and our work with Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Here's our advisory board. Frank Ochberg was my mentor, as well as Frank Straub's. And he really brought us together. And he was the first person who wrote a chapter with his colleagues on post-traumatic stress disorder, kind of coining that term and coining Stockholm Syndrome. So, and it really is a trauma expert, world-renowned trauma expert. Peter Langman authored many, he has the School Shooter Database, and he authored books such as Why Kids Kill, Warning Signs. Jessica Stern is a professor at Boston University and Harvard. She's a terrorism counter extremism subject matter expert. Alexander Westphal is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Yale. Melanie Penner is from the University of Toronto. She's an expert in developmental disorders, a developmental pediatrician with a real area of expertise in autism spectrum disorders and vulnerabilities to violence. Deborah Beidel started UCF Restores, which is a trauma-related crisis intervention. Mo Kennedy is the executive director of the National Association of School Resource Officers. Steve Hinckley is a sheriff. Kevin Fisher is the executive director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And then we have two people who were at the very beginning of development of this project. The Honorable David Jordan, who was an Ingham County District Judge, now retired. The Honorable Peter Hoke, who was a Chief Judge in Ingham County Court. They really helped us put together this model when we originated the model in adults, and then really transformed that model because early intervention is so important to children and adolescents. And then we have Motorola Solutions Foundation expertise as well. So more to come. So over the first year and a half, we have established the hub. We've established this advisory board. We've established the 4 pillars in the first 2 regions and began taking participants in late October of 2023. Over the next year, we'll establish the next regions 3 through 5, continue to grow our advisory board, continue our collaboration with the U.S. Secret Service and the National Threat Assessment Center there, bolster trainings from what we have learned and this community of practice, and evaluate the model eventually. Harvard will do that, and they're working on that now. It's a developmental evaluation process. Okay, so with all that being said, what questions do we have?
Thank you, Dr. Lai. We do have some questions for you.
Okay,
Here-
great.
Here's one big one. What role will the conviction of the mother in the mass shooting event have on prevention?
You know, that's a really good question. And I think that's yet to be seen. I think that, and I'm hopeful with the laws that were passed today, good day, in that regard, that parents will take seriously gun safety, and keeping, weapons stored safely within the home. And I think, you know, I think it's yet to be seen what will happen with what we're talking about, the Crumbly case.
Thank you. And following up on that, what can be done with an at-risk children whose parents won't cooperate, like the Crumbleys?
You know, I think, and that's what we're hopeful to learn with the model. We have to have voluntary right now, because the model, you know, is being studied, right? We're studying it as we go. So they have to volunteer for the program. But I think what we need is to try to, which is what our model is based on, bring that child into the fold, right? Give that child a reason to have meaning and feel like they're contributing to their community. We know the power of just feeling as though you belong, right? So before a child, if we can bring them into the fold and they feel like they belong, they are less likely to seek out extremist groups and have extremist views, right? Everyone wants to belong to something. So trying to bring them in, trying to monitor them carefully, right? The unfortunate thing is if a child has not committed a crime, or if someone hasn't committed a crime, you can't really force them to do anything. That's where our project comes in. People are afraid, and I think maybe because of what's recently happened in the news, that many parents are just ignoring their kids and just are callous to the fact that their child could hurt someone. What I will tell you from my experience is that's a rarity. Does it happen? Yes, we saw that case happen in Oxford, maybe. But most parents whose child that we have encountered, whose child have threatened an act of violence, or drawn a picture, or said they need help, most parents are trying, but they don't know where to go. Or they've tried and they've called community mental health, or they've asked the school for additional resources. The school may not have it. They've just hit dead ends. What our hope is to help with that. We're hoping to fill those gaps. We're helping to be that bridge and be that monitoring. And we're hopeful that this sort of model will be a model that eventually could be implemented within the school system. There could be individuals who could really be in charge of these high-risk kids, with the idea of bringing them into the fold, right? And really providing positive role models and people who care about them, right? Oftentimes, these individuals will say, you know, it doesn't matter because there's nothing for me to live for anyway, right? And so trying to provide something else. So that was a long answer, probably.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We have another one. How many children have been part of your program?
Okay, so like I said, just at the very end of October, we started taking participants, or opening the doors for participant eligibility. Thus far, we have had around 20, just in 2 regions in the state of Michigan, 20 children and adolescents referred to us.
Thank you.
And 2 ISDs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another one.
Yeah.
What are some of the common factors in the research base that have averted violence?
What we're seeing is, well, if we look at Frank's research with the averted school violence database, what we're finding, what has averted is if a kid is going down the path toward violence, someone speaks up. Someone has eyes on that kid and someone speaks up and says, this kid needs help. Usually if a peer, we can get peers to talk about it and we can get parents. Dr. Straub and I did a case review of an averted case that the Pawpaw case, which ended in the South Haven peer shooting. But this individual was identified in high school by some drawings. Eventually, he planned an attack and mother turned him in. And the attack he planned was on the school. And the attack was a plan to kill many people. Mom turned him in and he was placed in a juvenile detention facility for several years, about 2. When he was released, you know, he was monitored on probation, and did exceptionally well. That monitoring went away, and then those thoughts and that sort of isolation, and his extremist thinking came back, and he went to the South Haven pier and he shot a man and his wife on that pier after that supervision was gone. And so that's why we say that multidisciplinary teams making assessments, helping with systems navigation, keeping eyes on individuals, and monitoring and mentoring longitudinally, not short term. This isn't a 12 sessions of therapy sort of thing with these high risk, high need kids, and then everything's all better. No, it doesn't work that way. These are multifactorial. What leads to this is incredibly complex. It's all those things. It's environment. It can be psychiatric. It can be other biologic factors. And also this sense of what's happening with this individual. Do they feel like they have meaning in their life? Are there people who love them? You're a lot less likely to hurt another individual if you feel loved and cared for, and you don't want to hurt someone else by your actions, right? A lot of times these individuals feel like they have nothing to lose, right? So that's why we try to bring them into the fold and create, you know, have them as part of the community.
Thank you. That leads into the next question, which is multi-level, actually. Please say more about mentors. How many kids do they work with? How much time per day does the mentor spend with the mentee? And what sort of things does the mentor do with the mentee?
Okay, so these are individualized. So all with their individualized care plan. So some individuals, kids will need a little more time than others. Mostly what they're doing is they're checking in on them. They're forming relationships. They're helping them engage in pro-social activities. Initially, when we bring a participant in, we want them to meet with the mentor on a daily basis. They're checking in with them. They may be checking in with them at the library. They may be checking in with them at school. They may be checking in with them at a restaurant, or, you know, and usually the case manager's there and they're checking in with parent too. So the activities vary. Helping them to get signed up for basketball. I mean, it really is individualized, and it has to be. We train these individuals who are mentors to be that positive person in the kid's life. What we find is if kids are great barometers of if you like them or not, right? So what we want to train people to do is their face to light up when this kid walks in the room. Because usually these kids that we're talking about now, these kids have exhausted resources. They're difficult to handle in schools. They're difficult sometimes to handle at home, right? And what we want to do is we want to change the way they think about themselves, the way they think about the world, and the way they think about other people think about them, right? So we want people's faces to light up when they see them, right? To help them engage and believe in themselves. So a lot of it is talking, right? And helping the kid to find their space in the community. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. And we have another one. Have there been studies of mentor organizations like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, about how much these help kids avoid violence?
You know, specific studies, I mean, there are lots of studies about mentorship. especially following the adverse childhood experiences and ACEs, talks a lot about mentorship, or in mentorship in a broad term, a positive influence, one positive person in a kid's life changing the trajectory. There's lots of studies regarding that, especially if you look at ACEs, adverse childhood experiences and things. It can be a saving grace.
Thank you. And how will you manage to hire and train enough mentors for the many school districts in Michigan?
Yeah, so our task is 5, right? So we don't have unlimited funds. So it's the 5 regions, and so we have 2 people in each region plus our 5-person hub. And that's who we're hiring, and that's the bulk of the money, right? Over the 5 years, right? Paying for salaries and equipment in all of these areas. So for the pilot project right now, we are just hiring the 5 intensive support teams. Eventually, we are hopeful to sustain this model in the communities, in that it will be something that will become part of the budget for the communities, or in that we hope to continue the hub and then have individuals trained from the hub within the community, as part of the community, either the school system or, the ISD or something like that. So we have 31N case managers. Maybe a district would decide to make one of the 31N individuals in their district part of the intensive support team or something like that. And then the hub would continue to support those individuals. So right now we're testing the model. Right now it's a pilot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And with that, Dr. Lai, I do not see any further questioning, so I'm going to turn this back over to Vicki. Thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you. Could you stop sharing your screen, Dr. Lai?
Yes, I will.
Great. So what I'm hearing here is that you're answering the call that you hear many parents say who have a child that they just don't know what to do with, and they don't know where to get help. I mean, you've heard this over and over, that they didn't know what to do. They asked for help, it wasn't there. So it sounds to me like your program is really trying to fill that. And I really commend you for that, because I think that's really, once you get off and running, it could make a huge difference to parents, family, and children.
Yes,
Thank you so much for that work.
That's exactly right. We're trying to do a really thorough job of looking all the factors that are contributing to what's going on in this individual's life, and provide what they need by way of systems navigation and mentorship, so that we can change the trajectory of this kid's life. You have that opportunity. The brain is developing faster during this time of adolescence than almost any time during their life. So if you get a chance to intervene, it's a great time to intervene, right before they really choose that path of violence, because these things don't happen overnight, right? This is sort of kind of a long path.
Well, and you mentioned that too, longitudinal effort,
Yes.
not just treatment and goodbye.
Yes, it's longitudinal and sustained.
Longitudinal. Wow. Wow. Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch you. And we hope, that this really takes off.
Well, thank you.
Yep. And so do we have any other questions we'd like to address here? I didn't see anywhere in the box. No.
There are no
I'll
further.
ask one more if I could.
Yep, raise your hand if you want to ask another question. There you go.
I'm just wondering if in your experience, most school districts in the state, if they have enough social workers and counselors and so on to really help with this program. I realize that you're sort of going well beyond what most schools do, but I'm just thinking that I know about the Bloomfield Hills School District, which is one of the richest in the state. And even there, it seems to me like there are just barely enough social workers to keep track of the kids that need their help.
That's absolutely true. And these kids who are highest risk and highest need use up a large proportion of the resources, right? And we don't have enough school social workers and enough school psychologists. And we don't, and the other thing is the schools don't necessarily have a hub of support, right? They don't have they're trying to do, schools are trying to do everything now for our kids, right? Feed them, clothe them, teach them, keep them safe now, right? That's a lot, that's a big ask, right? So that's the point of the hub, right? So that even the consultation piece, if a school social worker needs to reach out and say, hey, what do we do about this? Or behavioral threat assessment team, we have that hub of expertise who can help and guide, right? We're there not to pull resources from schools. We're there to support what they already have. So I don't know if that helps answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
So we're hoping that this model works and that we would be able to eventually go into districts and train them on how to establish this within their own district with the individuals that they have. And then possibly get funding to put these teams together, like we have for 31N, like we have for Michigan State Police to put the behavioral threat assessment teams. And behavioral threat assessment, like Frank described, are the identifiers. Now you've identified all these kids. Now what, right? And so that's really where we come in, and that's where the model we hope will be one that you could implement throughout the state of Michigan and throughout the country.
Can you tell us what 31N is?
Oh, 31N is to put extra mental health workers. It's state funded by the Michigan Department of Education, a state funded project. 31N workers are mental health workers within the school system. To put additional.
So are you saying there's a program that's funded to do that already? Or
To put, yes, but doesn't have anything to do with our project. It's a separate thing. It started way before then to add additional mental health support to schools. Yes.
it does sound like it's a very labor intensive effort. A lot of people would be involved in all of this.
Yes.
Of course, they all have to be trained to qualify. I mean, but
Right. The hub, the hub, yes. So the hub that's what we spent the better part of the year doing, is creating the hub and the advisory board and that whole panel. Yeah.
well, we wish you the best with that.
Okay.
And we thank you for coming here tonight, Dr. Lai. And everyone else who joined us this evening. And I want to remind everyone that our next network meeting is March the 13th, but we're going to discuss what you all vision we can do the rest of this year in 2024. So with that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. So good night.